got one live. Man, I think my vertical still is not working. Just makes no sense. Just give me a second, guys. Sorry I'm late. I obviously have some weird stuff going on that I'm not able to fix for some reason. This stream's been a long time coming. I've had to reschedule it, adjust this a little bit, a few times. Oh, nope, there it is. God damn it. First, I do not understand this. Sorry, guys. I'm just trying to get the chat for the vertical. It like created a new stream and didn't use the one that I made. So I'm really confused. Be right with you. I swear. Just gotta find the thumbnail. There we go. Good enough. Okay, so I won't be able to see the vertical chat tonight, guys, because it just doesn't work. So sorry about that if I don't answer your questions or pay any attention to you. It's because I can't see it. But yeah, so basically, this stream is about the fact that we are clearly at not only a crossroads, but a crossroads that represents the make or break point for all of humanity, I think. And I'm really kind of perturbed and disturbed by the fact that people don't seem to be realizing how serious the situation is. I mean, some people do, but even with the propaganda and the brainwashing and the selective perception and the identity addiction and the cognitive dissonance and, you know, all of these things, I'm still surprised at the degree to which people are able to maintain their blindfolds. It is absolutely staggering. You know, we are in the midst of a new paradigm. I was just writing a blog post for my Substack. It's actually a revised blog post that I wrote like 6 years ago, and it could have been written yesterday. You know, by the way, I'm partly mentioning that because you guys should subscribe to my Substack. I forgot to put the link in the description. I'll post it again later. But it is a platform where I have the ability to speak freely, and there are blogs, videos, audio recordings. It's going to be a lot more comprehensive. I'll be able to market things that I can't market on YouTube, say things I can't say on YouTube, and for the patrons, all of the posts are going to be free for the first week before they go behind the paywall for everyone else, and they'll also be released to my patrons first. So it's a great way to support me as opposed to this platform. But at any rate, I was going through it, and it just kind of reiterated to me all of the tremendous aggregation of evidence that we have for teleology in nature, for the possibility of it's not a possibility. We know there's non-neural cognition. The possibilities are the implications. You know, what does it mean if consciousness is quantum? What does it mean if it arises from entanglement? What does it mean if memories are stored in a field instead of in neurons? Or partly, or, you know, something's going on there. Michael Levin et al., check it out if you're not familiar. You know, and then we also have the advent of AI, just empowering people to a degree that's not being taken advantage of by a lot of folks, largely due to fear, I think. You know, all of these things, together with the explosion of interest in entheogens, laws are relaxing in a lot of places. I saw that even in the U.S., the DEA has given a church permission without having to be sued for the first time in United States history. What's going on? You know, we have a tremendous amount of stuff going on. We don't have much of an audience tonight, though. 2 guys, really? Oh, it's Monday night, yeah. Well, I'm happy that the two of you are here. It's unfortunate though because this is a message that a lot of people need to hear, and unfortunately, I don't think most people that need to hear it want to hear it. And eventually, we are going to get into politics a little bit, but I really feel like I need to paint this picture, of the potential that is looming, that we are immersed in, that we are in danger of squandering. And really, this channel, everything I do, the work that I do with plant medicine, it's all about trying to minimize lost human potential. That's really the main driving factor for me. I realized a long time ago that due to unfortunate circumstances in our culture and the lack of support and education and just the general gestalt of vapid, empty, selfish, that whole paradigm of abject materialism has really put a lot of people in a position where they're doing more harm than good to their children, to their friends, to society in general. That's becoming the rule rather than the exception. It used to be that people that were of that kind of mentality were ostracized from society. But it has become, over the last couple of decades, I think, the norm. And people that actually have some kind of sense of having a commitment and being part of a collective that they're somehow obligated to, those people are the exception. We cannot continue like that. Hendricks once said something like, if we don't put the power of love above the power of money, we're doomed, or something. I've always put it like the people that are interested in spirituality are not interested in power, and people that are interested in power are not interested in spirituality. This is a terminal condition, All the way back in the time of, what was it, Plotinus? Plotinus, I was just reading last night, the kind of truths that we're uncovering, the sort of Spinoza's God kind of implication of a lot of the discoveries in morphology and consciousness and, I guess, neuroscience. They all kind of point in the direction of this sort of archaic revival that Terence McKenna talked about a lot. And one of the things that all of those people, Eliphas Levi, Aleister Crowley, Plato, Aristotle, Empedocles, on and on, all of these brilliant sort of mystics or magicians, all sort of prophesied that humanity, the prophecy of the lament of, it's not Thoth. The prophecy of Thoth, you could call it that. I don't know how, I can't remember. It's like Asclepius maybe, the lament of Asclepius. Either way, also that old prophecy. They all kind of predicted a time where humanity would lose touch with its spirit. It would be consumed by materialism. It would completely lose track, and it would be on the verge of destroying itself when a sort of new paradigm emerged that would turn things around. And that new paradigm was about the reconciliation of science and spirituality. And the result of that is not that suddenly we are exactly validating all of the superstitions of the old paradigm and confirming the existence of the sky gods of the institutionalized religions. It's not that at all. It's something much more congruent with reality. It's something much more grounded. It's something much more practical, but it's definitely something real. And over the years in my search for contact with this universal mind, it has surprised and delighted me and terrified me and confounded me over and over and over again with its demonstrations that it is absolutely real. The universe, upon awakening, definitely becomes much more interactive than so many people believe. And the reality is that this experience of the living universe awakens something in us. It gives us context for our lives. It teaches us that we have to discover our own purpose and align that purpose with a greater purpose in order to have any kind of real, true satisfaction in our lives. There really is no other answer. If a bird tried to function like a fish, what would happen? Very quickly. It really is that simple. You have to know your nature and live in accordance with it. And the reality is that as the scientific paradigm expands its parameters, and if you're intelligent and paying attention, that also sort of re-engineers what you might consider your spiritual life, but it also informs it, right? And then availing yourself of entheogens and technology, you guys see where I'm going with this. It's limitless potential. Here's the problem. Now we have come to the crux of the apostrophe, which is this. The mysteries taught this knowledge, how to see it. They did not teach dogma. They don't hand you a book and say, go and memorize all these passages of this, follow these rules, and you'll have mad bread to break up, if not 16 to life on the wake up or whatever. You know what I mean? You're going to hell, boy. Not that. But there are processes that can be catalyzed within the individual. There are seeds that can be planted if the soil of the mind is made fertile that allow people to see these things for themselves. And that is crucially important. Right? But the mysteries were banned in Egypt first because the pharaohs noticed that if people achieved this kind of homeostasis with their internal and external environment, they could not be controlled, and they don't need to be controlled. Why anyone would want to control people that don't need to be controlled is completely beyond me, but it's neither here nor there. This happened in Egypt, and the mysteries, again, were banned by the Roman consulate for the same exact reason. And they've been demonized in the United States and Europe for the same exact reason. And I think that what is happening right now in the world is that there's sort of like you put your thumb on a hose and eventually you can't hold the water anymore. This reality is an emergent property. Consciousness is an emergent property. It's sort of a field of coherence. It's not something generated by neurons. We know that about cognition. It's more difficult to say it about consciousness because we really don't know what that is exactly. But it's a pretty good indicator that they are, integrated. The more intelligent a species is, the more self-awareness they tend to have. The more intelligent a person is, the more self-awareness they tend to have. Right? And so this field is forcing its way through all the cracks and fissures in the materialist paradigm. It's coming to us through biology. It's coming through neuroscience. It's coming through morphology, which is biology, I guess, and all kinds of different directions, all simultaneously. And the overlords are well aware of it. They are well aware of it. They know this stuff probably just as well as I do, the ones in the highest places. And so their efforts to scramble our minds, to distract, to defraud, to divide, have astronomically increased. And they have been incredibly effective at it. I think I'm kind of stalling in regards to getting into the political thing because I am kind of aware that it's a fool's errand. People are so entrenched in this stuff that it's pretty much a waste of time to try to talk to anyone about anything in regards to politics. There is the problem of, identity addiction, which has to do with investing your self-worth. You define your self-worth according to your perception of a political figure, basically. This is something that is a tremendous fucking problem right now. It's basically one of the psychological mechanisms that they exploit in order to have presidents and kings and shit at all. Really the label is just a sort of sophisticated way of saying that primates follow an alpha male. And as our consciousness and our intellect has, become more sophisticated, it's a more of a complex problem, I guess. So there's that issue. We have people so invested with Donald Trump, for example, that like the other day I posted something about how his tax bill was a complete sham. It was a lie. He broke all of his campaign promises. And as proof of that, I posted a short where there's a guy, I don't know who he is. He represents the Trump administration, some tax IRS head, or I don't know. But he's at Congress, and they have the bill, and the guy questioning him is reading the bill, and he's like, just a percent increase on people making below $15,000 a year. Is that a typo or something? And the guy, I could actually pull it up. We could watch it real quick. I don't know, whatever. You guys can, it's the last short I posted. And then it goes to another clip where they're going through all, they said, did you actually get rid of the tax on income? And the guy's kind of beating around the bush, and he's like, just answer the question. No. Did you eliminate Social Security tax? No. Did you eliminate all of the stuff? He went through the whole list of things that Trump said he would get rid of. And the way that they did it, so you can't exactly call him a liar, is that they kind of made clauses that sort of gut these provisions in the bill, so they're more or less meaningless. And then there's all this other crap about selling off national forest in order to pay for the tax cut for the 1%. The 1% has the lowest tax rate that they've ever had in American history. While the country's roads are deteriorating, bridges are collapsing, crime is rampant, there's homeless people everywhere, people can't afford health care, you know what I mean? And yet you still have people cheering this guy on. We've heard talk of ending habeas corpus, right? And that's a double-edged sword, because if they do that, then the citizens also don't have any obligation to respect the government's authority. And it would probably be used as an excuse to institute martial law. Because once, if they actually made that announcement, there will be people that will rise up, and they probably will be working for the feds, in order to create the impression that martial law is necessary in order to get control over the people. You guys all know about the labor camps. They've been sending detainees in the United States to Libya and Rwanda, because slavery is tolerated there. And I don't know what's going on in Rwanda, but Libya, it's oil fields that they want to have free labor in. They have arrested American citizens. If you go to, is it El Salvador, you're never coming out of those detention camps. They sent an innocent person there. Trump actually photoshopped MS-13, or whoever had intelligence to it, photoshopped MS-13 tattoos in the guy's hands. There are pictures of his hands from right before he was arrested. There's no tattoos. In order to justify it, and the president of El Salvador said they're not letting him out no matter what ever. The dude will die in there, right? And there are some satellite photos that you can look up online that suggest a lot of really terrifying things. And here's the deal, right? If you know that innocent people are getting sent to death camps and you still support them, you belong in one of those death camps. That's it. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You know what I mean? I understand identity addiction is a problem for people, but at a certain point, you have to just admit you were wrong, And another aspect of this that I feel I should point out, the whole ride since I started this channel, I've been describing what is going to happen, and it's all happening. The only way that it's possible for someone to describe the behavior of a system is that they know the system and how it behaves, Another thing that I need to point out in regards to the two-party politics thing, right? Both parties are completely hijacked, both of them. The rhetoric of the puppets changes, but look at the trajectory. Concentration of wealth in the top 1%, and the lower classes are progressively destroyed, and that destruction is accelerating, right? And all of the old arguments that people have tried to use to preserve the system in America no longer work, because there are countries that have free healthcare, that have good education, their happiness index, in like all of them, the top 10 countries in the happiness, healthcare, and education by those metrics all have the same socioeconomic political system, more or less, right? So when people say, show me a better system, it's like, okay, that's easy. You know how to use ChatGPT? Can you type? Go look yourself. There are plenty of answers. The answers have been there forever. The only reason that people in the United States have been conditioned to believe the things that they believe is because it serves their masters. It serves their overlords. That is it. That is all. It is no more complicated than that. Donald Trump is not a hero of the people. He is not going to help you. He is not going to keep any of his promises. He has demonstrably been a POS his entire life. His own mother was horrified that she created him. People, the blowing off all the pictures with Diddy. He was his best friend for a while, and he literally said that Trump was the most horrible person he'd ever known. This is coming from Jeffrey Epstein. In a private conversation. It's not like he was trashing him to the press or something. It's really, really obvious that the totalitarian state that I've been warning about all of these years is actually taking root in the United States. And one of the things I had mentioned doing in this video, I'm not really, we'll probably do it eventually. But on my birthday, I ate some mushrooms, and I was watching some video about Saturn's rings containing some kind of intelligence. They said they'd found some kind of anomalous signal in Saturn's rings with AI and analyzed it and determined that it could listen and respond and all this stuff. And I eventually vetted it, and I'm pretty sure that most of it is not real. But it doesn't really matter in terms of the value of the video. And in my defense, I did post in my Discord when I shared the video that I had not vetted it and wasn't 100% confident that it was true. It doesn't matter. If you watch it and just listen to the protocol, the analysis protocol that this AI is describing, and all of the scientific concepts that it's talking about and the context that it's putting them in, that is all real and true. So it's really valuable, and I'll tell you why. A lot of people, when they watch what happens in the U.S. political arena, right, they see all these dumb decisions being made, and they assume that, and they're only dumb as they relate to the people, right? Not ever to the elite. They always benefit. But the tariffs are a great example. And also these certain announcements that Trump would make, and then he would retract them a couple days later. It was the most obvious market manipulation I've ever seen in my life. And to top it off, somebody leaked a video where he was standing around with a bunch of billionaires, and he was congratulating them on how much money he had made them last time he bounced the markets around. And there is proof. It's not proof in the 100%, like fly on the wall with a camera in its eyeball kind of proof, but you can actually track, like when he manipulated the crypto market, you could see buys of absurd amounts of money, like $200 million, and then they would sell right before the next, you know what I mean? Like clearly insiders, and it's happening with the stock market as well. So the consolidation of wealth, again, is the point. But anyways, what I was saying about the AI and watching this video that probably isn't really 100% on point in terms of facts, but the analysis, if you consider that the government probably has technology, we used to say like 20 years ahead, in the 90s, that was the best guess that people had, 20 or 30 years ahead. But if you consider there's a word for this, where there's an exponential acceleration of technological advancement. and the rapid development of AI and whatnot, it's probably significantly beyond that, you know, and that's something that I think people are terrified to admit to themselves, you know, that the kind of techniques and technology that is used to analyze and predict the response of populations, the psychological impact that propaganda will have, for example. You know, I think it's, even most conspiracy theorists, it's really lost on people what it is that they're actually dealing with in terms of the sophistication of the surveillance and analysis and the propaganda, you know. And as a mystery school initiate, I know for a fact that they have understood psychology and energy far beyond the general. That's how they got into the position that they're in, right? Mostly the reason I'm pointing this out is because if you want to understand things, that's how you have to look at it all. You know, part of how I developed my skill at being able to predict the government is from growing up with a narcissist mother. I don't look at what they're doing on the surface and react to that. You have to look beyond that in order to, you know, ascertain what is really actually happening. This is how I knew that Trump was being set up to be a dictator. It was nothing he said. It was the propaganda all around him. I knew that they were sort of grooming people to perceive him as an almost godlike, you know, taking advantage of the right's religious predisposition. And you know what I mean? It was just obvious that that was the end goal. And I described that in much more detail than I just did now, like 6 years ago in a YouTube video. Actually, it's the one that got me demonetized. 20,000 people almost. So I saw the numbers shoot up, and I wasn't even talking about the subject, but I just thought, holy shit, like, what's the most important thing that I could possibly tell an audience this large? So I started describing what I think is the reality of what's happening in the United States. YouTube didn't like that too much. Let me check in with the chat real quick. All right, so, you know, a couple of other little things. I've been really unfocused this stream. I'm kind of surprised because I thought about this a lot before I did it. I don't know what exactly is going on with me, but it's really easy also to sort of identify like the main markers that should alert people, you know, things that you can use that are unarguable. Election integrity, right? There's no election integrity. The blockchain would solve any if, ands, or buts. We've had blockchain technology for what, at least like 20 years now? Longer. So why haven't we ever heard anyone in high places suggest using the blockchain? Because they don't want election integrity. We have had experts analyze and say it is concerning, right? No one is. They didn't say this is airtight. You guys have nothing to worry about. You know what I mean? You guys probably already know all this, but I think she was 11 years old, hacked a voting machine and changed the results in under 8 minutes or 3 minutes. It's been a while since I read this article, but it's one of the two. It was quick. You know, the manufacturers of the machines admitted, the company that makes the machines admitted to having rigged them for elections in other countries at the behest of the CIA. So if the CIA doesn't think that people's rights, that democracy is, you know, holy, as they portray in the United States, why wouldn't they do it in the United States as well? What else do we got along those lines? There's definitely more, but the real point is this. if you think back to when did this start? I guess it was Trump and Clinton, that murdery lady, right? When she lost, the left was like, oh, Russia, rigged it and it was rigged and blah, blah, blah. And then when Trump won, am I getting this out of order? The point is that if you look back at this stuff, each side claims that the other side cheated every election cycle, and the side that accused the other side of cheating the cycle before says, how dare you undermine democracy by saying that? The same people just switch narrative every fucking election cycle, right? You can go through and you can find tremendous amounts of evidence of that. Another one that I really love is when Harris was debating that Hawaiian woman. What's her name? Tulsi Gabbard, I think. She said something like, the only thing that we need to know about Joe Biden is whether he's a grapist or a gracist, right? If you think about the fact that this is a black woman running for the left who is supposed to be pro women's rights and pro, or anti-racism, I guess, pro equality all the way around. When Joe Biden, she also said, I believe every one of his victims, and I think he's been accused like 11 times or something, She said, I believe every one of his victims. The racism is well documented. This is not rumor. He dropped out of the race in the primaries with Obama because he said, come on, man, a clean, articulate, well-educated black man, you just don't get that, right? I mean, it doesn't get much worse, really, unless you're in some, redneck's truck somewhere drinking beer. So the only reasonable answer for any person of any integrity, and I'm assuming that you're supposed to have integrity if you're going to be elected to the White House. That should be a prerequisite, I would imagine. Obviously, it isn't. In fact, I could make a pretty strong case that you have to the way they choose presidential candidates is like, okay, who do we have that is the biggest piece of shit with absolutely no spine, that has no integrity, no morals, no remorse, absolute sociopath, narcissist, psychopath, egomaniac, fucking tool. Who do we have? And also, they have to have a couple of hours at least of Epstein video that we can hold over their heads and others. You know what I mean? But the only answer that woman could have given when he's nominated her as his VP was, hell no. I'm not standing next to that man. And she would have said everything she really thought and tried to get him out of her party. If you really represented any of the values of the Democratic Party, the supposed values, you should be outraged that there are even people like that in the party anywhere, much less leading it. And she herself had called him out on multiple occasions. And one of those occasions was only 2 weeks before Biden nominated her. Everybody acted like they just didn't see it. Everybody just acted like they just didn't see it. So can you imagine, from my point of view, watching this election cycle, and I know what Trump is up to. I know who's behind him. I know it's the same people that are behind Biden and Harris, So I'm not rooting for him, but I'm not rooting for her either. And I remember what she did, what she said. And I'm seeing all of these people just crying and, she's so amazing. And the reality is that if one person even was able to demonstrate for certain, she said this about him, and then she accepted his nomination, she should be disbarred from holding any public office. Not to mention the completely horrific history that she had. And I hope you guys understand what I'm trying to accomplish here. It's worse or just as bad with Trump. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. But in order to cure a sickness, you have to properly diagnose it first. And so the first step is that we have to get people to admit to themselves and to everyone how bad the situation really is. That it is, so explicit, so obvious, so unarguable, that the only people that they will allow to play the role of puppet president in the United States are the worst people that they can choose from. When they had Biden running against Trump, they could have had Andrew Yang, Tulsi Gabbard, I think. I don't know if she switched parties the first time or the second time, but you know what I mean. There were all kinds of people that were highly educated, young, progressive, which is what the left is supposed to be all about. There were all kinds of options that would have made sense. But those people are not completely under control the way that people like Trump and Gabbard are. The idea that Trump can't be controlled because he's a billionaire is fucking retarded. And it's the same people that say that in order to get into the billionaires club, you have to do stuff like go to Epstein's Island and they have to have dirt on you or they won't even but accept him because it's convenient for you, for your belief system. Give me a fucking break, man. Completely fucking insane. I was about to take this somewhere else too, and it totally slipped my mind, but let me check in with the chat again. See how y'all is doing. Oh, and then check this out. So I do believe that they can rig elections. There's not much point in it, I don't think, if they control both sides. The thing is, if they have the reason that they have to do it, it's not really about who's in control. It's about phases of conditioning and where the narrative is going. It's about the trajectory of shit at the time. Certain rhetoric matches red, certain rhetoric matches blue. So depending on what the agenda is, and they do have to kind of swing a pendulum to try to, have an effect across the aisle, right? That's why it's necessary for them to have red or blue at any given time. It's like the flavor of the psyop for that duration is determined by that. But check this out. It's a lot easier to just throw an election than to have to rig one, especially when you've kind of got everyone's attention and people are kind of suspicious, right? So think about Harris. Think about her. First of all, Trump had already beaten Clinton, who people did like. I know the right didn't, but a lot of people on the left loved the Clintons. Hillary probably a lot more than Bill. She had the victim card to play because of Bill, and you know what I mean? She was a former first lady. She's not exactly charismatic, but she's a hell of a lot more charismatic and funny than Harris. Harris was just awful. Every time she opens her mouth, you just want to fucking, right? So she has this horrible history of human rights violations, really keeping slaves in prisons in California. She would keep people past their release date in order to keep them doing free labor for the state. She put all these pot offenders in prison, and then when she was asked if she smoked pot herself, she's like, "Yeah, I'm Jamaican," and laughed about it. Like, she was horrific. I can't even remember the other. There's a whole lot of just awful shit that she did. Anyways, you guys get where I'm going with this. He had already beat a white woman who had a political, she was a first lady, all this stuff. So they're going to put Harris And if they really mean what they say about thinking that the right are racist and misogynistic, why would they try to persuade them when it's so critical, right? They're supposedly trying to beat Trump, the most dangerous man in the world or whatever. And they just, well, let's just see if a black woman can win this time, I guess, you know? No, you guys, it's stupid. It's fucking stupid. They never had any intention. And I wouldn't be surprised if she actually got more votes and they still did rig it, you know, either way. But I just, you know, I can't believe that people believe it at this point, that they watch this stuff happen and are like, okay, that makes sense. You know, no, it doesn't make sense. None of it makes sense. It does not make any fucking sense. Not a lick, not a shred, not a hair. I noticed we haven't gotten any comments. Let me see if I can look at the vertical or any questions or anything. Why is it doing this, man? There's no tags. I don't even see a chat. So, you know, is there a solution at this point? You know, what are they going to do next? There are some pretty seriously fucked up things that we have to consider. A lot of Trump supporters at this point are so dedicated that he could just pull a baby out of his pocket and start taking bites out of it live on, you know, network television. And they would just say that he's playing 4D chess or something, you know. There's literally nothing he could do. Like, there have been pictures of concentration camps, you know, they're free speech. People have been getting arrested. Supposedly, Trump and Elon were going to bring free speech, right? 21% more compliance with government requests for censorship on X since he took over compared to the fucking pandemic. You know what I mean? For censorship to be higher than it was when the pandemic was happening, when, you know, if it was a real pandemic, the justification for censorship would be higher than like ever, right? So playing devil's advocate, the fact that it didn't go down even after the pandemic, it went up, and he's supposed to be allowing, you know, free speech. You have accounts that went from 500,000 views on average per post to 500. I criticized Elon. I was almost to monetization. It plummeted by half somehow. Just in one day. In one day, I lost like 400 followers or something. Just right after posting something that was like really brutal in a high traffic thread that was true. And then the next day I was like, what the fuck? Half my followers are gone? It's not censorship free. It's right-wing narrative censorship free. You know, people have gotten arrested for criticizing Trump. People are getting sent to or deported that have green cards or actual citizenship because they protested, not necessarily violently, you know. In at least one case that I know of, she was not accused of breaking anything, stealing anything, stabbing anyone, any kind of shit like that. She just protested on behalf of Palestine. Oh my God. And now it sounds like he's turning on Israel, right? And remember that all this surface level politics shit is just a smokescreen. Trump called Clinton out on accepting money from Qatar and other Middle Eastern countries on the grounds that they were abusive to women, that they were homophobic, and they were terrible people because of this, and she should give back every last dime that she received, and to the Defense Department, right? He has accepted a like $400 million jet from like the Prince of Qatar. And if you watch the video of he's talking in front of this guy and he is kissing his ass so hard, it's embarrassing. It's crazy. And he's saying things like, you know, the United States is hot, but not as hot as your country. So he's putting the United States second to this guy's country, which is a crazy thing to see a U.S. president do, right? And then suddenly he waffles on Palestine and Israel, right? Well, you know why that is? Because that prince wants a pipeline to Europe. so that they can have that business. So they give Trump a nice shiny plane, and all of a sudden his political rhetoric changes. That's a bribe. They also gave him $2 billion in crypto investment money. So $2 billion and a plane, and suddenly, and what is the right going to do about this? What is MAGA going to do about this? Just act like they always supported Palestine now? How are they going to explain, this guy just clearly got like $2.5 billion in bribes, and then took an action that represents a complete 180 on his prior political stance at the request of this dude because he wants to put you know what I mean? Like, how are they going to keep this up? And that brings us to our solution segment of this presentation. I'm trying to get myself whatevered. I don't even want to say it. Where was I going? Yeah. So you might be thinking, even if I agree with you, Mr. Illuminostic, what the fuck could we possibly do at this point? They they even just announced contact with 4 races of aliens. Some head of the Pentagon said this to Congress, right? Assuming that's true, and the Dirac equation pretty much makes it certain. There's at least 300 million civilizations in the universe that have had technology for 10,000 years. And look where we're at 100 years in. You know what I mean? We just teleported light for the first time the other day, which is a step beyond where we were a couple months ago with just information. We're on the verge of immortality. The chances that there are not aliens that have been here and made deals with the government or whatever, you know what I mean? It's just, the Project Bluebeam thing is stupid as hell. There's no doubt that there are like immortal beings that can teleport anywhere they want at any time, and we are a noisy planet. We can detect gases that indicate life from like across the universe after having technology for 100 years. You know what I mean? Like, come on. So the possibility that all of this is actually under the control of some advanced civilization other than humans, super, super high. Super, super fucking high. If that's the case and they are not on our team, we're fucked. That's just, there's no way around that. They might be though, and I've often promoted the idea that it doesn't make sense for a hostile race of beings to make it off of their planet and starborn, because we are on the cusp of destroying ourselves after only 75 years of, when did the first nuke was dropped in the 40s, right? So, it's roughly the same. You know what I mean? We would not make it if we were all a bunch of evil bastards. It just doesn't really track. So we have that going for us. Point being, with their being as advanced as they are, having the technology they have, having all these mindless fucking foot soldiers and shit that will just do anything they're told, like these ICE agents and stuff, what in the hell are we going to do? There's a couple of things that need to be considered. 3, actually, maybe. One of them is hubris, could be their downfall, right? Like Trump manipulating global markets so his buddies can make billions and billions of dollars, and taking a bribe from a Middle Eastern sheik and then doing his bidding immediately. You know what I mean? Like, if that gets any worse, it's possible that people will be forced to snap out of it. I'm not super invested in that possibility. But the flagrance of it all at this point is actually surprising me. This shit with this sheik or whatever he was is wild. Like, after talking this shit about Hillary, specifically with this group of people, right? They're terrible people. They're terrorists. You should never take money from them for any reason. The United States would never take money. You know what I mean? And then he just does it and then does the guy's bidding, like, in front of everyone. Hubris could be their downfall. So there's that possibility. The second possibility is benevolent aliens. I have personal reasons for having some stock in that particular option. And the third one is the one that I'm always promoting on this channel that I've basically devoted my life to, and the evidence for it actually being a scientifically verifiable reality is increasingly concrete, which I feel really good about. The other day, actually, I just did fresh research on this because the last time I checked was probably a couple of years ago, and I didn't get anything. And since then, there have been a bunch of studies on meditators and entrainment of brainwaves. And also, one of the big questions was whether or not it's actually even true that people that have a higher level of consciousness are somehow oscillating at a higher, faster rate. And this is important because entrainment tells us that whatever is cycling the fastest, lower cycles have to chase it and try to sync with it, right? So the research is in, it is real. It's definitely a real thing. The entrainment and the other possibility is entanglement, but I think that probably is more of like a carrier than a cause, if that makes sense. So if you continue to free yourself from the morass, the sandbags on your ascension process, you're going to take other people with you. There's no way around it. They have no choice in the matter. And we really have been sort of neutralized in a way in terms of our ability to influence people through conversation and the conventional forms of persuasion and articulation, or persuasion by articulation. The propaganda is too thick, it's too good, it's too strong, and the fear is too great. Some Nazi, I think it was Goebbels, I don't even know if I'm saying it right, but he was on trial being questioned, and he said it wasn't even the the NAZ thing, doctrine or anything like that got people. It was fear. And he said, if you just scare people badly enough and confront them with enough unknowns, they'll do anything. That's basically what we're observing. So, every single one of us that manages to create new imprints, to dissolve the old ones and create new imprints, or to just free ourselves from them, to elevate ourselves above all the dissonant frequencies, fear, greed, hate. Every single one of us that frees ourselves from their sense of commitment to a political ideology, it ripple in still, like a ripple in still water when there is no pebble tossed nor wind to blow. And it loosens the mind-forged manacles that have their brethren and sistren confined. Culture is not your friend. It's really a sad thing, too. I think one of the reasons that a lot of people can't accept that Trump is really that much of a betrayer is because it's hard for them to believe that somebody could really get people's hopes up and like feed their dreams, and you know what I mean, that they were the whole time just lying through their teeth and deceiving, and that's why they picked him. Think about the guys in the white vans. Like, it's no problem for them to do that on a scale that's unthinkable for most people. And that's what every single United States president, since at least Nixon, probably earlier, has been. You know, if you look at what they really did, who did the New Deal thing? Was it FDR? You know, where they were like, we're going to break up all the corporations into smaller ones so that there aren't monopolies. What do you think happened? The shareholders were the same people. Didn't do anything, but it was a gesture that convinced people to go back to sleep and stop paying attention. You know, you see that over and over again. It's all a facade. And the reality is, too, that, you know, if you think about a caterpillar, when it goes into a chrysalis, it liquefies. Even the neurons, everything. It doesn't even have the same brain that it did when it recoagulates, but it does retain memories. Right? So if you burn a caterpillar, when it becomes a butterfly, it will still be afraid of fire. And butterflies that haven't been burnt aren't, by the way, just in case any of you were thinking, well, maybe it's just because it's fire. No, they thought about that when they did this research. And so the same is probably true of our society. Sovereign people, you know, if we had illumination on a mass scale, if the standards of scientific illuminism were the foundation for our educational system and society, it could be done. And I'm not talking about some naive utopia. There's always problems. There's always going to be problems. The universe is made of opposing fucking energies in perfectly equal, you know what I mean? But we can raise the floor, right? So what I was saying, though, is that in the same way that that caterpillar has to completely liquefy, there's a good chance that we're not getting through this without a period of complete and total chaos. You know, solvet coagula. The ancients knew what they were talking about. All this stuff is legit. And we have to just retain the memory so that we never, ever go back. It's kind of like death, really, you know, the sleepwalk that people are engaged in. They do not have light, so they're wandering into darkness. They had the truth, but they found error. And without that sense of purpose, without that connection with the universal mind and an understanding of your place in the universe and what the point of it all is, you know, it's literally hell. That lack of presence, lack of awareness is hell. Unfortunately, though, it's not generally so much hell for the people that are sleeping. It's hell for the rest of us that are more aware of it. This too shall pass, you know. Video froze? I can fix that probably. Yeah, that's the quota, right? Man, I really wish I could figure out why my vertical is acting so weird. Yeah, I had a goofy look on my face when I froze too, huh? Let's see if I can fix it. Come on, man. So, you know, kind of recap, like, people thought Trump was bringing them freedom and liberation and getting rid of all the evil in the world. The motherfucker is the evil in the world, you know? And you can't just switch parties to fix it. That's not going to do it. And unfortunately, violins probably aren't going to do it either. You know, that's probably an unwinnable war as well. Something that I did skip over earlier, though, that is kind of encouraging, is that, is that my avocado over there? I think I'm going to eat this avocado. They wouldn't put all this trouble into the propaganda and controlling the population and keeping it divided and scaring the shit out of everyone if they didn't need to. The fact that they need to tells us that we still have a chance. And somewhat of an advantage. You know, I talk about how I believe the universe consists of completely, right? But there's an intelligence involved, you know? And when you think about chaos, like, look around you. You see mostly order, right? You see a computer, probably, I don't know, maybe you're looking at a phone. There's all kinds of order, right? And then there's chaos elsewhere in the world. But there's chaos in your blood vessels. You know what I mean? There is chaos constrained in all of these systems that have order and purpose. You know what I mean? So it's not like it's just loose, wreaking havoc everywhere, you know? And so there is a teleology, I think, to it all. And if you align yourself with the creative, the life force, you know, the positive, however you want to articulate it, you do have an advantage, because that is the general trajectory of the universe. This is one of the reasons that evil often manifests so intensely and concentrated, like dropping atom bombs on people, you know, that kind of thing. Just here it is all at once, boom, you know, war, whatever, in like greatly concentrated manifestations. There's something going on with the planets too. I need to watch this video again, but it's definitely legit. The guy's like an astrophysicist or something. He's not like a new ager. And I wasn't fully paying attention, so I don't know that I have it quite right. And I'm not that much into astrology anyway, as you might think. But as you guys probably know, the sun is going absolutely ape shit right now. And it's very inconsistent. Like, the predictions aren't playing out. The other day it was kind of announced that maybe the maximum had already passed, and now it was just chill, and then it like burped up a giant solar flare, like the biggest one so far. So, you know, it's just really crazy. And there are also chaotic conditions in the sun's corona and field that have never been seen before. Things are getting wild on a solar level. And I am deeply convinced that that corresponds to a lot of stuff here on Earth. So watch out for that. But what I was really getting at is that the sun is moving into Gemini, I think, tomorrow. And over the next couple of months, every planet is going to be aligned with its opposite at some point. Gemini, the twins, you know. Just wanted to throw that out there because I found that a really interesting sort of bit of evidence for this whole universal mind concept, and a lot of other things that go along with it, you know. But the fact that the planets are all pairing up like that right as we move into Gemini is wild, you know. It's a crazy, crazy thing. And one of the expectations that we have about moving into this new paradigm is that collective synchronicities will be observed more and more often, and they will be more and more obvious and on a larger and larger scale, because macro, micro, as above, so below, as within, so without, right? If the process of awakening for an individual involves experiences of higher orders of symmetry like synchronicity, then the same will be true in macro of the collective. In fact, a couple of years ago, there was a penis and balls shaped iceberg floating through Conception Bay off the coast of Dildo, Nova Scotia, on its way to like uterine, Bay or some crazy. I don't remember the last one, but you know what I mean. Like just super ridiculous stuff like that, and you can find quite a number of manifestations of that. Another one that I actually predicted a few years ago was that we would have disclosure at the same time that artificial intelligence got really big, because AI, because it's two opposites on the same spectrum. So I figured, they're going to merge into our awareness simultaneously, and that's appears to be what is happening, and that kind of stuff is important to pay attention to, because if you really are a sane, rational, thinking, logical person, you do need evidence. If you don't need evidence in order to have faith, I'm sorry to have to inform you of this, but you're just not bright. You know what I mean? We have been, part of our conditioning is that we have been encouraged to believe in religious systems that demand faith of people. And there's a reason for that. Believing things for no reason, to have that inculcated into your perceptual apparatus at a very young age, is very convenient for people that want to sell you a lie for the rest of your life. There's a reason that these religions are so obviously ridiculous and stupid, and have so many insane components and whatnot. And they want you to believe them anyways. There is a reason for that. Look at the world, look at the world. And I guess what I'm saying is that the evidence is everywhere now, Earlier I started talking kind of about how that's one of the reasons the overlords are freaking the fuck out right now, and they're going through all this trouble to try to divide and confuse and, fascinate the population. It's just too obvious. We have scientists saying as above, so below in like physics videos and shit all of a sudden, I mean, it's impossible not to notice if you're not completely absorbed in some dumb fucking game that has been foisted upon you by your fucking high priests, the demonic high priests of Babylon. All right, let's see. Do I have any explanation of how Israel has power over Trump? No, I really don't, and even if I did, I probably couldn't say it here. That's why you should follow me on Substack instead. But no, honestly, I have some ideas. Some of them are really far out. One of them is that so in the Old Testament, right, you have, sorry guys, I gotta have some coca. It's really late here. I don't know why I scheduled this for so late. I think that's one of the reasons when I started I was super scatterbrained, because it's like 11:30 here or something. It was 11:11 when I started, so yeah, maybe I shouldn't do that. Anyways. So, the Old Testament, Moses was supposedly adopted by the pharaohs, right? So he was initiated into the mysteries. And it should also be noted that, I don't know how to put this. I don't want to say I have good reason to believe. Let's just say that there's a possibility that Thoth Hermes, who is alleged to have taught the knowledge of the star people to the Babylonians and Egyptians and Syrians, was not human. And that probably kind of led me to this possibility. But so Moses is connected to Pharaoh, right? And the pharaohs had these big ass houses that we still don't really understand how they were built. While we're on the subject, actually, I'll share this with you guys. years ago, I streamed about this when I thought of it, and it seems to have been confirmed, which is baffling. Um, but one day I was just sitting at my computer, and I just had this like, I don't want to call it a vision. It wasn't that dramatic, but it was just like the pyramid with the capstone off, and what I recognized as electromagnetic fields, basically pulsing out of the top of it. And I knew that it was being used to either manipulate the morphology or consciousness or both of organisms, possibly just humans on the planet. Of course, now we know that that's actually possible because of the research that Michael Levin has done. So, I didn't think too much of it at the time, although it really did kind of strike me. And then a couple days later, I saw a video about melted, is it granite? It was two different things, because it wasn't just on the around the capstone. There's also connecting a couple of the pyramids. There's like a burned trench in the stone. And there's also the melted stairs at the Temple of Hathor, which some scientists have said the only thing that could have done it is a nuclear blast or electromagnetic energy, like a really strong charge of electromagnetic energy. And a lot of experts have tried to say that it was like water damage or something stupid. Look at it, pull it up and look at it. It's not water damage. It's obviously, it looks like melted wax, So then I discovered a guy had written a book about how he thought the pyramids, he was an engineer, and he wrote a book about how he thought the pyramids were generate electromagnetic energy. And then a separate group of scientists discovered that the pyramids do generate their own electromagnetic fields somehow. And the fact that the latitude is the same as the speed of light, obviously Egyptians didn't use our latitude or like miles per hour or second or, we'll save that for a different video. But I have an idea about why that would correspond as well. But when I saw that also, I was like, the mysteries of light were the thing. And this electromagnetism and the speed of light, the latitude of the fucking thing. And there's other dimensions that add up to it too. So all this craziness, right? And then they find these, what I was thinking about this, because I was like, okay, well, there's no technology in there. It's not like it was a giant crystal or something, There has to be something under the pyramid, some kind of mechanism that generated this energy. And then maybe it's just the pyramid is conducive to distribution of energy or amplification of it. Not really sure about all the details. But then they found those huge things underneath the pyramid, which, have you guys heard anything else about that? Because I haven't. Point of the matter is, super advanced technology is going to be light-based, and Thoth connected to the pyramids, Moses connected to the pyramids. Moses takes the Jews out in the desert. And I don't remember the whole story. I don't remember all the details, but I do know that Moses encounters God, supposedly. And for some sketchy-ass reason, only Moses is allowed to see God's face, which kind of indicates to me that God doesn't want everyone to realize he's not God, but some fucking lizard alien or something, And so this God is floating around in this metal tent, right? And if you were Bronze Age or earlier, tribal people, and you see this metal thing floating around that's kind of shaped like a tent, that's a decent name for it. And so this thing seems to know about diseases and whatnot. It's like, don't lay with people with sores and don't eat pig and, all this stuff. And it's like, it's kind of odd. Seem kind of medically informed for a metal tent. Must be God. And I think there was something about, like, if you violated the rules of this metal tent, you had to come stand behind it and it would incinerate you. And so it floats around, and they described like projectiles blowing up like enemy tribes. So this thing also has a political objective. So, you don't have to be smart to realize something's fishy here. And I realize things in the Bible, a lot of it's just stories, like Samson and Delilah, or Samson and the lion at least, is from Hermes. It was borrowed from one of Hermes' tales. So is the giant and the little guy, David and Goliath. So at any rate, though, let's just assuming that this is, based on an actual event. This thing's got a political agenda. It knows about disease, and it floats around in a metal tent, which suggests UFO, blows shit up with projectiles. No one's allowed to see it but Moses. You know what I mean? If it was God, he would deal with his problems directly. You just plague people. You don't need a metal tent to float around in either. You would just be everywhere and everything and omnipotent. Nothing about it makes sense. Nothing about it makes any fucking sense at all, unless it was just some kind of technology, And the fact that the pharaohs have these giant fucking things we still can't build with some weird stuff underneath that has apparently just disappeared from the media, I think it's possible the Ark of the Covenant was real, and it's some kind of technological thing. And it may not be just the Ark of the Covenant, but I wouldn't be surprised if that tribe of Jews who are not, I'd realize, the Israelis of today. Nevertheless, I wouldn't be surprised if they have some kind of weird technology and they've got the entire planet by the balls, because nothing else really makes sense. People talk about, they made a lot of money from technology and whatever, but it just doesn't add up. They have some kind of fucking leverage that is like absolute. So, and by the way, when you see Trump apparently turning on Netanyahu, that's just surface level shit, Behind the scenes, in order to make it look like it makes sense to people, there's doing that publicly, but behind the scenes, for all we know, Netanyahu just pocketed $400 million. And him and Trump are on the phone like, yo, dude, I'm about to put you on blast on CNN, but you know what's up? Like, you know what I mean? It just, you can't believe anything that you see in the media. But yeah, the Israel thing has bugged me for a while, It really has bugged me for a while. Another reason that I suspect them, the tribe of Judea, of actually making it defies like the possibility of like human engineering. I think it's hard to imagine that people were thinking like, we have to create this language so that there are all these weird mystical things that it can do, like the tetragrammaton. When you add the spiritual fire, the shin, to the center, it becomes the pentagrammaton, and it's the savior, and it redeems matter by spirit. And, it does a lot of weird shit that suggests to me that whoever engineered it in the first place was a pretty fucking advanced being, Another possibility that I have to admit, though, is that those kind of algorithms already exist in the universe, and that we are draping our own symbols over them, but the algorithm is already there. So that's another possibility, I guess, that absolutely would explain gematria. And another, while we're on the subject, I guess, the reality of some, like an underlying algorithm, is definite, because logic and function as it exists in our language and syntax is a mathematical function. You know what I mean? It is math. It is an algorithm. English is an algorithm. And it's like there's a main algorithm, or there's three of them, and then you have languages that branch off that are like, similar algorithms. I'm sure there's a better word that some programmer out there would know, but so anyways, other than higher intelligence, it is possible that it's just, an expression of the underlying mathematical structure, and that also makes sense. So Well, all right, folks. We have pretty much covered the bases with this. I was not as together as I would have liked, and this is something that you really need to make a strong case for. But I hope you found this all enlightening and helpful to some extent, and I don't want to say keep the faith, because that's not what I mean. But miracles are not only real, but they're more the exception than the rule. It's just that familiarity breeds contempt, kind of. You become accustomed to being surrounded by the miraculous. And one of the great devices of deception that the overlords have used, and it could even be largely a natural consequence that is just convenient for them. But the entire paradigm has been about reducing the ineffable to the level of the mundane as a matter of routine. As a not just a routine, but just almost like an ontological process or something, like that reductionist thing. And just like Jung said about synchronicities, when you start to be more aware, I think you actually attract it. So we really just all have to remember how dangerous fear is. Dance with doubt, nagging, excellent mistress, doubt, but nagging wife. At the same time, only the madman is absolutely certain. So we must extinguish fear and dance with doubt. The problem, the elephant in the room now, is that doubt is the source of most people's fear. Whether you're doubting yourself or you're doubting your religion or your political beliefs or your partner, the unknown, for some reason, is the greatest fear for most of mankind. But that's not insurmountable. For me, the unknown is everything. If your disposition is such that you're not content with mundanity, is that how you say that word? Mundanity, I guess. The mundane, you're not satisfied with the mundane. You're not comforted by being doomed to repetition. Then you have no reason to fear the unknown, and you can embrace it. And every single step that you take expands your empire. And every fear that you overcome loosens the chains on every other sentient creature in the universe, really. And the people that think that they don't care about that have got a rude awakening in store for them. Because you cannot do anything without affecting everything. And you are not free. As long as anyone else isn't free. What's funny is I'm trying to wrap up like all these other contradictions and stuff that I missed earlier, like with Elon Musk and all these people are all going through my head all of a sudden, all the stuff I couldn't think of 2 hours ago or whatever. Like his, I didn't talk about the fact that the Trump assassination was so obviously staged. I didn't talk about the fact that Elon Musk acts like he wants to save American tax dollars by conveniently raiding the government and taking over the agencies that are investigating him. Yet he doesn't care that there are child slaves that he's sourcing products from. You know what I mean? Like, that's okay. You know, if he was serious at all about giving a shit about anyone, wouldn't he prioritize like not profiting from child slaves like above like everything else? Take care of that first and then worry about people's fucking tax dollars. You know what I mean? But people just got to stop being dumb, man. It's not funny anymore. Really not funny anymore. It's so easy to see through the smoke screen that they've created. It's such a... That's the scariest part of it, I guess, you know, when I look at it and I'm like, come on, man. You can't seriously believe in this shit, you know? And you get arguments like, you know, if I say something bad about Trump, people will say shit like, oh, you probably can't tell the difference between a boy and a girl. It's like, dude, I'm not a liberal. When people respond to you like that, do they think they sound smart? Or, because really what they're doing is saying, yeah, you're so right that all I can do is say something stupid. You know, or whataboutisms. If someone answers with a whataboutism, you're dealing with an idiot and you should just not bother anymore, you know? Like when I've pointed out corruption, it doesn't matter which side it is. You know, if it was when Biden was in office, it was Biden, and the Democrats would say, well, it's not like Trump, blah, blah. It's like, what the fuck, man? What is that supposed to mean? What is that supposed to do? You know? Like, do they actually think that they're fucking saying something? Because what they're, like I said before, it's the same thing. You answer somebody with a whataboutism, and you're just, if my point is that both parties are the same, and all you can do is come up with a whataboutism when I point out corruption on either side, you're just saying you're right, dude. It's not an argument. So anyways, guys, thank you so much for spending this time with me. I hope it helps somehow. The parties pretend they hate each other when in fact they are the same team to keep us separated because God forbid if we were to unite, this is the biggest fear, we pay their wages. Correct, Ann. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. And I think one of the things that tripped me up tonight is I've gone through the propaganda techniques so many times on this channel. Like, there's almost a part of me that's like, man, the fact that you're still saying this shit is just proof that you shouldn't bother or something, you know? But yeah, the frustrating thing, one of the frustrating things about not being able to convince people of this is that if you just take the time to consider, if you take, you know, assume the position as in the case of a devil's advocate, and then you just look at both sides' propaganda and their narratives and you analyze it, then you get a big picture and it confirms what I'm saying. You know, it's not hard to do. It's really not hard to do. I actually had a conversation with a woman that has a PhD in psychology and a bunch of like undergrad degrees or something, and like a big stack of diplomas, you know, degrees, whatever, pedigree. And I was like, how in the fuck is it possible that there are all of these like Ivy League psychologists and whatnot out there that don't call all this shit out? You know, like, it's not hard to see. This is not even hard. Like, that's why it's so scary. It's not hard. And she really couldn't give me an answer. You know, I would trust her to tell the truth. You know, I was like, I know it's not a conspiracy. Like, they're not all under control. That's just stupid, you know. But there's something weird about it. There's no way that they don't know or something. And all she could really say is that they're just comfortable and they don't want to rock the boat, and people do know this shit, but I guess they just don't see any value in saying it. And here's the evil reality of it. Like boomers, for example, they don't give a fuck. And the reason is they think they're going to be dead when this shit catches up with them. You know, and people talk about how they forgot about the 60s and like, not exactly. They just realized that they were going to be dead before, you know, they had to pay the bill. And, you know, so that's a big part of it, I think. You know, people are, they're using their heuristic bias in order to maintain their delusions in large part. That's a huge part of it. And heuristic bias is like, because it was this way before, it's going to be that way again. You know, this is why when you go start your car and you drive to work, you're not really panicking about it breaking down all the time. I used to, because I don't have all these biases. I'm neurodivergent in the way that I don't really carry around a lot of cognitive dissonance. I don't have heuristic bias, you know what I mean? And it's a problem. In a way, it helps me because I can see a lot of things that most people don't see. But on the other hand, it's also kind of, you know, problematic because all those things are there as instinct to help us to function, you know? So, anyways, yeah, that's it. It's heuristic bias. They just think that since things were the way they were yesterday, that they're going to be that way again tomorrow. And they assume that that's going to last at least until they die. So they've just fucking bitched up, tucked tail, and punked out. I hope that we can expect better from this generation. But there's a lot of effort being put into making them kind of, I don't want to say weak exactly, but passive, you know, very, very passive. Or just like pointlessly violent, belligerent, you know, just extreme opposite, but not any good for anything, you know. So hopefully it's really true what they say about Substack. I'm already doing better there than here, sort of. And I haven't even published anything yet, just an introductory blog. So hopefully, you know, one of the problems that we have with our movement right now is that I don't have any resources. People in my community don't seem to have a lot of resources. We're trying to create resources together, but when you're starting with nothing and you need to do it quickly, it's very difficult. Where the fuck was I going with that? I totally lost my train of thought. It was important too. Oh yeah. There's no leadership. You know, in the 90s we had at least like Terrence McKenna, and in the 60s there was Timothy Leary, and the Grateful Dead kind of was, you know, touring around the country all the time, at least spreading psychedelics and psychedelic energy everywhere, and there was something happening, you know. But I think partly due to their control of the algorithm, they're not allowing anything to like congeal. And I don't like the idea of being a leader. I don't, you know, people need to lead themselves. That's the whole point of this stage of our evolution, is to become sovereign individuals. But in the meantime, it's like I just hear a little bit of momentum could make all the difference. It wouldn't take much now, you know, the veil is super thin, super thin. You have to be almost like consciously determined to remain fucking stupid at this point, and asleep in order to play along. It's like glass almost, the whole charade. So we shall see, kiddies. All right, cheers, guys. I am going to get some food. Good night. Please hit the like button, share, subscribe. Consider supporting us because we're demonetized, and if you don't, who else will? Cheers.